Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us on today's webinar, Scaling Customer Success with Technology, brought to you by Technology Services Industry Association and sponsored by Totango. My name is Inga Triago, your moderator for today. Before we get started, we just have a few housekeeping items. Audio is routed through your computer speakers. If you encounter audio quality or technical issues, let us know right away via the questions panel. You may access full screen view via the toggle button located at the top right area of the console. We do have one poll today, so as we roll that out, be sure to join in. We encourage you to ask questions at any time via the questions panel. If you don't get to your question today, we will follow up with all individual questions via email. And finally, a link to the recorded version of today's webinar and the PDF of the presentation will be sent out in the next 24 hours via email. Once again, thank you for taking the time to join us today. I would now like to introduce our presenters today. Judith Platz, VP Research, Customer Success and Support for TSIA, and Kaiser Mulla-Feroze, Chief Marketing Officer for Totango, one of the pioneers and leaders in customer success technology. We do have a lot of exciting content to share in the next 30 minutes, so let's go ahead and get started by turning things over to our first presenter. Judy, over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Inga, and Kaiser. Thank you for sponsoring our webinar today. I'm looking forward to presenting with you. So what we're going to talk about today is scaling customer success with technology. We know that our technology firms are struggling with setting up customer success. More and more we're hearing from our members that customer success is their leading initiative for 2015 and certainly for the years ahead. And yet, as we look at the people, process, and technology that's needed, there's many, many questions that are coming in around what should we do. When we look at the three profiles of customer success that we see, we would all probably agree that technology companies historically have been very, very good at the land and renew functions. But I think we'd all agree that the adopt and expand cycles have not been the strengths of a majority of the technology companies. We conducted a customer success baseline survey at the end of 2014, and when we did that, what we explored were the types of work that people were having their customer success management teams perform. And when we produced the results of the customer success baseline survey, we could see three very distinct charters that were in place for customer success organizations in the industry. The first one, over 40% of the respondents said that they had adoption as their main focus area. And when we explored what adoption really meant, it was the charter of focusing on helping the customers embrace and really use what the company had as far as offering for the technology and the service that was in place. The second charter that was clear and distinct was retention. That charter very, very focused on improving the renewal rate with the customer. It did not mean, though, necessarily that the customer success organization was directly responsible for the renewal of either the subscription or the maintenance renewal, but that the customer success organization was monitoring and following and making sure that the renewal happened. The last charter that we looked at and found was expansion. And expansion, 10% of the industry said that their customer success organization was focused on expansion of the account. That charter, its sole responsibility was to achieve revenue expansion in the accounts and to grow the revenue base in the existing account for that customer by selling additional services and additional products. When we looked at those expanders, they were not only necessarily focused on expansion, they also had adoption and renewal. And we did find that the expanders were probably the more mature of the customer success organization, but really this was the smaller percentage of customer success organizations that were in play today. When we look at the models that these three groups then and how they play within the traditional life cycle that we looked at earlier as far as the land, renew, expand, what we can see is customer success is now playing a role unlike traditional service organizations have played in the past. In today's model, the most common scenarios are listed on the screen. Number 1 is the most common that we're seeing. 2 follows that, 3, and number 4 is the least common. But what we can see in each is customer success is being brought in post-sales, and they're taking responsibility for the areas where we see the handoffs and we need the account coverage. So number 1 being the most common, number 4 being the least common, but really covering an area that traditional services and support hasn't been able to cover historically. Kaiser, when you look at those models that I'm showing on the screen right now, what is it that you're seeing as far as engagement models in the customers that you look at?
Sure, Judy. I think what TSIA is seeing here with these different customer engagement models is very indicative of where the market is today and where the market has been. And we've seen that a lot of companies have historically come to customer success looking at it from one of these 3 charters that you talk about: adoption, retention, or expansion. But what is interesting is that more and more, and this is very recent, just in I would say in the last 6 months to the last 9 months, we're seeing that many companies are coming to us as they're just about getting started setting up their customer success organizations. And these companies who are sort of starting from scratch, they're really looking at how can we get to this model where customer success is really driving all these charters: adoption, expansion, and renewal. And I think the driver for this change today is really that customer success is becoming more and more of a board level priority. We're seeing that there's a lot of urgency at the executive team level around customer success and around each of these charters, because I think the executive team and the board really see that companies can no longer afford to just narrowly look at one of these 3 charters, or to be more accurate, as you said earlier, for these 3 charters to be viewed more in a siloed approach with divided ownership. I think companies are increasingly seeing that customer success really needs to play a core role across adoption, expansion, and renewal, and there really is a lot of blending between these 3 charters.
Right, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. So probably like us, you are seeing that we have to figure out, we can't just throw people at a problem, right? And we know that technology is going to be key here. At the end of last year, when we did that baseline survey that I talked about, and those results are available on the TSIA.com website, one of the things that we found is customer support and customer success executives really have to understand how they can automate a lot of the processes that are involved in the adoption and the retention and expansion activities that are going on. We're seeing more and more customer success hiring going on today at rates unlike we've ever seen in the past, but we can't possibly scale with just the people. We have to have technology in place. When we went out and produced our customer success technology stack paper last year, one of the things that we did is looked at the types of technology and the planned spending in certain areas. The thing that we clearly see is the opportunity to use technology today to improve the adoption, increase the retention and upsell, and certainly improve the customer loyalty. There's obviously various platforms that are required and applications that are going to be required to do this. We look at that stack. I'm showing you an example of how we see that stack, and this paper is also available on our website. But the stack is shown here on the screen, and we really break it down into the 3 layers: the customer-facing layer, the productivity layer, the infrastructure layer. And we firmly believe that a customer success management team will have to have access to each of these three layers. And for true success of a customer success team, they will need to be able to interact with technology on all three of these layers. We look at the planned spending and the adoption for these areas. And what we can see here is the upsell, cross-sell, recurring revenue, and the consumption analytics over there on the very, very left of the screen. And we're going to focus in on those. We see that CRM and such have very high adoption, and clearly, we've been using those in the industry for quite a while. We know that they're out there. We know that the use of those is quite high. But the adoption of the other areas is where we are going to see growth in the next year. These are the untried and probably the largest opportunity areas for automation and boosting productivity. So when we talk about things like the consumption monitoring, that's the core part of a customer success initiative. Being able to understand how customers are using the technology, being able to look at what a customer is doing and how they're doing it, being able, again, to look at the recurring revenue and knowing what analytics can be used for and automating the subscription renewals and having predictive analytics in place to look at dashboards and tracking. And allowing employees to focus on the higher value activities that are so important when it comes to the recurring revenue that's in place. And then, of course, upsell, cross-sell. These three areas right here, we at TSIA firmly believe are the areas that our customer success executives and teams should be focusing on, certainly for the rest of 2015 coming into 2016. So for the rest of today's session, what I'd like to do is focus, Kaiser, if that's okay with you, on these three areas and talk a little bit about what this means. When we break down that stack that I talked about earlier, we can see where those three items lie in that particular stack. And, I'd like to make a couple recommendations here. The stack solution that people put in, it should be able to provide usage reporting. It should be able to have a customer health analysis in place, and it should have some workflow analysis and workflow management for the account. We see today, when we look at our broad base of TSIA members, that a lot of this monitoring and analytics is lacking. It is, again, probably the greatest automation opportunity for most of the membership. And we think this is probably the key piece for outcome-based services that our members have in place. And this is going to become probably the truest differentiator for members who are going to stand up and become leading customer success organizations. So I would love, Inga, if you're okay, to do a poll on this, because when we look at the planned spending and the adoption, I'd love to know from the audience that's with us, in the next 12 months, are you planning to deploy a customer success technology yourself? And so thank you, Inga, for opening the poll. And Kaiser, I know this is something obviously at Totango. You're probably, looking at this closely because your organization is so involved, obviously, in customer success technology. But Inga, you can go ahead and close that and broadcast the results. This, as we've talked, Kaiser, is one of the largest growing technology fields that we've seen in years. And here's what we have. 65% of the people today are planning to make an investment in technology similar to yours.
That's amazing. That's strong validation of what you presented in your last slide, Judy. And if I could just sort of jump in here, when you actually sort of think of it, companies today are in many ways sitting on a gold mine of customer data, which, if I could sort of say so, most of them are for the most part sort of ignoring. And this is data, as you say, about what your customers are actually doing and not doing inside your applications. What your customers are actually achieving, what are the results that they're getting or the results that they're not getting from using your service. And if you look at it in today's sort of, digital environment where our products are offered as cloud services, where we have mobile apps and web-based tools, really your application, your service is now at the heart of your customer data. Your own application actually today tells you a lot more about your own customers. And the data if you think of it, the data that resides in other more traditional customer applications like your CRM system or your ERP system, that is really data that you have entered about your customers. And it's often static data, and unfortunately, very often it's also stale data. And the data that about what your customers are actually doing themselves, what they're achieving in your product day in and day out, that is the real data that can make a difference. That is the data that can give you the true insights on how your customers are actually using and what they're achieving with your product. And those are insights that you would otherwise not have. So this piece, Judy, that you sort of referred to as consumption monitoring and analytics, that really, in my opinion, is foundational. Everything else flows from there. And what you mentioned about the customer health analysis and the account workflow management, I think for all of that to really operate effectively, you really need that consumption monitoring and analytics. And without that, you really cannot scale. And this is a major mindset shift that we're seeing in the marketplace. As you're seeing through your survey, we're just getting there. The adoption of that is still relatively low. But it is an area where we're seeing companies catch on. So that's very interesting. And as I sort of move forward, I think before I sort of get into speaking specifically about how technology is reshaping customer success, I wanted to take a step back on this visual that you see in front of you. And this is a visual that we really see resonates a lot with our customers and with companies in general. And the premise really here, what you're seeing on your screen, is that customer success is ultimately about managing your customer journey. It's about understanding, measuring, and driving customer value at every point in your customer life cycle, from adoption to renewal to expansion. And it really is not so much about managing the renewal event or managing the upsell event in itself. The whole point here is to understand where a customer needs to be at every point along this journey. And then what's the optimal path is to keep customers along this green course. That's what you really want to achieve. And you need to understand as a company how your customers can stay on this green path and what is it going to take you to avoid them falling off and being on the red path. And you need early warning signals when a customer may be going off course. And what we see is that even though each of these three charters, Judy, that you presented, adoption, renewal, expansion, even though each of them are obviously unique in terms of their business process, in terms of their primary objective, when it comes to the underlying technology that is needed to drive adoption, retention, and expansion, there is really a common thread. And that's what I'll talk a bit about over the next 5 minutes or so. What we're seeing is that there are three main technology capabilities that I think companies need to have when they think about customer success. And we use a simple yet powerful framework to represent this. We call it Listen, Understand, Engage. And it really works across these three customer success charters. Listen is about the technology to pick up and collect all the right signals of customer health. Understand is the technology to convert these signals into insights. These are insights that tell you exactly which customer needs your attention and why. And lastly, Engage is about technology to operationalize customer success. It's about translating those insights into action. And we believe really that today customer success organizations need a new approach to productivity. They need a new paradigm to function in this world. And that's what we'll talk about. So let's take a quick look at each of these three charters. Now, I already spoke after Judy's polling question about the fact that today, the core of your customer data really resides inside your own applications and services. This is what I like to think of as sort of the living and breathing data about your customers' behavior, about the results your customers are actually experiencing from your product. And in order to capture meaningful application data, you really need technology that is in some way sensor-based, technology that is providing a live data stream from your application. Think of it like a Fitbit for your customer health. This is not the type of data that you can capture through your traditional enterprise ETL and integration projects. And for some of you, out there who are thinking that, this is great. It's great to have it's great to have a Fitbit for my customer health, but this is a huge undertaking. It is a major breakthrough, but it's also a huge undertaking. I think the good news is that for those of you who've spent years in sort of, typical enterprise integration projects and ETL projects, when you're talking about actually getting your enterprise application data, this application data and data streams from your actual service and application, if you're using the right technology, it's relatively speaking a breeze. It's much, much easier than the traditional integration projects. And one thing that I'll note here is that it's really important for you to capture both account level and user level data. This is really important. For example, you want to know who are some of your power users in your application and your service, who are the laggards, and what does that mean for your product? What does that mean for your organization and your customer success initiatives? You also, for example, want to know and want to be able to see who are some of the new users in an account and how onboarding is progressing for these new accounts. In any enterprise deployment, your deployment is never static. You constantly have new users entering, and you need to be able to track how onboarding is going for new users, even within established accounts. The second technology component is about making sense of all this data. It's about converting all this data into meaningful insights. This is what drives your early warning system, for example. You also need to be able to take an adaptive approach to modeling customer health. You need to be able to create different customer health profiles, let's say based on different customer segments, or based on the different stages of the customer life cycle that I showed you in my first slide. For example, the way you measure health for an onboarding customer should be very different from the way you think about health for an established customer. And this is something that your customer success technology should allow you to do. And ultimately, the key here is that you need to understand and impact the leading indicators of customer health. Traditionally, we've all had to rely on some degree of guesswork, whether it's through surveys or through support tickets or other proxies. But what if you guys can understand the business results and the ROI that you are delivering to your customers? What if you can actually understand how your customers are engaging with your product? That takes the guesswork out of customer success, and it also helps you to understand who exactly within your customers needs your attention and why they need your attention. That is really important. And that brings me to the last technology component that I spoke about, which is around operationalizing customer success, around translating insights into action. We believe that there is a new approach to productivity for customer success teams. And this is something that's really important for customer success teams to follow. It is not the paradigm for customer success teams is not the pipeline management paradigm of sales. It's not the project management paradigm of professional services. It's not the ticketing paradigm of customer success. It's what we like to call portfolio management. It's the portfolio management paradigm. And this is really about knowing which accounts in your portfolio need your attention today. It's about being able to proactively respond to this. It's about being able to have the right context to make a difference for your customers in the moment. This, in our opinion, is the only way that you can really scale customer success. You need to also be able to target your engagement not just at a user level and not just having one-to-one engagement with every user and every customer, but also being able to work on customer success more programmatically, have an impact on customer success through one-to-many programs, through campaigns, through automation. And that is how we think customer success organizations of the future will use technology to really drive their customer success initiatives. So that is all I have for today, and I'll hand it back over to Judy and Inga to wrap up this presentation with Q&A.
Thank you so much, Kaiser. And yes, I'd like to take this time to thank Kaiser and Judy for a very informative and insightful presentation today. Yes, and now we are going on to the Q&A portion of today's webinar. The first question is for Kaiser. You mentioned having consumption analytics is core. Can you provide an example of a consumption analytics metric?
Sure, absolutely. So let's to keep it real, let's take some example, and let's think of consumption analytics. We like to think of these what TSIA calls consumption analytics really in three categories, and that's something that I presented in one of the slides. It's around business outcomes or business results that your customers are seeing. It's about the actual product usage and adoption, and it's about the service utilization. So let's take quick examples of each of them. So we think that the most important, ultimately the most important driver for customer success is the business results. Customer success teams ultimately need to understand the business results that they're delivering. So an example would be, let's say you're an online recruiting platform, and what you are ultimately delivering to your customers is an ability for them to recruit top candidates at top speed. And so what you want to be able to measure, and what's going to be a metric of success for your customers, is the quality of candidate pipelines that you're providing to them. So how do you measure that? And if you have the right customer success technology, you should be able to look from within your application and from how your customers are using your application, whether you are actually delivering to them the right candidates and the top quality of pipeline for them to succeed in the reason that they're purchasing your product. Let's take another metric around product usage and adoption. Let's say you're a help desk software, and the primary purpose of help desk software is ultimately to increase productivity, to allow companies to do more with less. So what you want to see is the number of tickets that every active user, every active agent in the company is closing within your application. So that would be a good example of a usage metric that you would be tracking within your customer success technology stack.
Thank you, Kaiser. We are coming to the conclusion of today's webinar. I'd like to remind everyone on today's call that a link to the recording and the PDF of the presentation will be sent out in the next 24 hours via email. So be sure to be on the lookout for that. I would like to take this time to thank Kaiser and Judy for a very fantastic session today. You shared a lot of great data and a lot of great information. And I'd also like to thank everyone for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us on today's TSIA webinar, Scaling Customer Success with Technology, sponsored by Totango. And we hope to see you at our next TSIA webinar very soon. Have a great day, everyone.